So what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to show you how to make a Carmen Rose. So I know that, indeed, now I've got the dog barking off. I set some homework a couple of weeks ago now about Carmen Roses, and you've all done lots of research. So basically a Carmen Rose doesn't actually have to be a rose, but it's a composite flower. So I'm going to be using a rose today, a silk rose. But I think some of the pictures that you posted, I think they had lilies in them, and you could do the same sort of thing with dahlia and peonies, but it's just like a multi-petaled flower, which is on a single stem. So as I say, I'm making use of these silk flowers that I bought in January. I'm going to pull them apart, and I'm going to be using my hot glue gun. So I'm using my hot glue gun for speed, and I'm using my silk flowers for convenience. But you can actually do this with fresh flowers. So you would buy yourself some stems of the rose that you wanted, and you shouldn't really, it's not advisable if you're using fresh flowers to use a hot glue gun, because it's just too hot and it's going to singe your natural plant material. So you could use, well, I would advise using the Oasis Floral Fix. So it will just slow your process down a bit, because this Floral Fix doesn't fix or dry straight away. It's sort of a short delay. It's one of those glues where you sort of leave a slug trail on your petal, and you have to let it air dry for a few moments. So probably what you would do if you're using the glue, you'd have all your petals lined up and you glue, have 20 of them on the go. And the time you'd finish gluing the 20th, you would start to pick up the first one and adding it onto your rose. So this is demonstration purposes only silk flower and the hot glue gun, but you can absolutely do this with fresh flowers. But I would advise using the cold glue and using the one that's been specially formulated for use with fresh flowers. So the beauty of me filming via Zoom is that, of course, you'll have noticed my friend over on my shoulder. So that is my phone, which is set up on the tripod. And I'm going to do now is to switch the video over. So there'll be a short delay as I fiddle around with my mouse. And you'll be able to see over my shoulder and see exactly what I'm doing. So what I've got here is, imagine that this is my fresh rose, but it's not. These are the roses that I bought from Amaranthine Blooms a while back. So I paid out the, according to my budget, I bought the most expensive silk flowers that I could afford, and the ones that were really, really lifelike. So they've got a lovely two-tone quality. They've got quite realistic leaves. And what amused me here, they also have thorns on them as well. But like lots of our flower arranging projects, I'm not going to use the full length of the stem. I'm probably only going to use the top half. It's going to be cut in half. I'm not going to do that just yet. And this is going to be a video of two parts. I'm going to show you how to make the Carmen Rose by gluing the petals around the natural head of the rose. But I'll end up, and you'll see that when I've finished gluing, that the back side isn't going to look very pretty. So next time we meet, I will show you how to decorate the back side, or cover up your mechanics and the gluing on the back, and how to make more of a feature of the stem, because it's going to be cut, and if this was a fresh flower, it's going to wilt because it's got no water source. So you would have to, a bit like making a buttonhole, you have to tape the bottom. And then do you remember when we made decorative handles for our bouquets? We'll be using the same sort of technique. And I'm going to do a ribbon finish on the back side of the Carmen Rose and take that down with the ribbon handle along the bottom, along the stem length as well. So I'll end up with a huge rose. It depends how many rose heads you're going to use, but it might be this big, about the size of bigger than the palm of my hand, but it will just be supported on that one narrow stem. So it's really quite light. And I think this style of bouquet is quite a good one. If you were thinking that you wanted a nice, neat, wired shower bouquet, think of the one that Kate Middleton had when she got married. It was really delicate and really light. This might be a good alternative to that kind of feel. It's not going to look the same, but it's certainly going to give you a very sophisticated, neat, petite, lightweight look. So the first thing you need to do is to take your flower heads, so whether they are fresh or whether they are silk, and when you have to take your rose apart, you have to pull it apart. So when you were doing this for your fresh flowers, you've probably done this action already, that when the edge of your rose, you always have the little guard petals, the ones that were protecting the bud when it grew. And you would probably normally, if you were putting your flowers in water, just to have a normal bunch of roses at home, you may well have been used to peeling off a few of the leaves because you wanted to get rid of the discoloured pieces. Sometimes I leave them on because I think they look quite pretty. So you've probably got used to the action, and it's quite a nice action because you're sort of pulling, he loves me not, you're pulling them off. So it's exactly the same thing, and you would lay out all your petals and just try not to be too heavy-handed with them if you are using fresh roses, because they will bruise and tear quite easily. So what I'm doing here is taking apart my silk flower, and I have to be a bit tougher with it. Obviously, it's been made to be robust and to withstand, not so it's going to immediately fall apart. So I'm being quite rough here. I've already cut the stem down on this one, and I've pulled out the central piece that was holding the flower together, and I'm pulling off the sepals here, again, which are protecting the bud, so I don't need those pieces. And again, with a degree of firmness, but care at the same time, I'm pulling the petals apart. So these have all been glued together. So it's a matter of being, as I say, firm. And when I have prepared some petals earlier, and I managed to rip one, but that was only one out of a whole head. So I didn't think I'd done too badly. So you can see here, I am having to pull quite hard, and it is slightly unnerving because I'm getting the sort of ripping sound as well as the glue comes apart. Anyway, I'm sure you get the idea that it is quite therapeutic. It would be therapeutic if it was a fresh flower, but I feel I'm being quite brutal with this rose here. But holding onto the head in my hand and pulling it away, and then you'll finally get through what's right in the middle of the rose. There's a little polystyrene piece that looks, it's teardrop shaped, so it's not all petal. You'll eventually get down to the bit where it's got this sort of hard core to it, and some of the petals are a different shape. They're not this nice rounded shape. They've sort of been cut open. So probably I think I'm going to leave it there, and I'm left with a tiny bit of rose, which is good for nothing really, go in the bin. But I have got left with lovely petals, and perhaps from where you're sitting they might look quite natural. They are, as I say, a good quality rose, but they are nevertheless a silk flower. So I've got my pile of roses, and I've got my flower head and my hot glue to the side. What we're going to be doing is finding the base of each petal. Now I can tell easily where this is because I can feel the hot glue, the previous glue on mine. And you'll know from if you're using a fresh flower, because you'll have a nice smooth edge at the top, and then you'll have where you've pulled it off the heart of the flower, you will definitely see it's sort of normally a bit yellowy at the bottom, so you'll easily tell which is the right way up. And quite simply, I'm going to put another dot of hot glue on the bottom of the petal, and I'm going to glue more petals onto the rose. So it's not a difficult thing to do, but it's just quite laborious in terms of the time that it's going to take up. Now the thing the main tip for you is that when you come and place your petals, when you come sort of offer them up to the main rose, bear in mind that the tip of the new petal should be on a level with the top of the rose. So don't think that you're adding them on at the base, because if you add the petals on the base, you're going to end up with a round ball. And what we're trying to do is to get just a sort of a multi-petaled rose that comes out like this. So it's going to look a bit odd when I finished, because by the time I finish putting my roses on, the petals on, I'm probably only going to be attaching them sort of halfway up the rose. So they're not going to come naturally from the bottom of the rose. I'm probably at some point going to be gluing them up a bit higher in order that the tip at the top of the petal lines up with the top of the rose, and that'll become obvious as we go. And then the only other thing to think about is that the petals are naturally shaped, so they're sort of this sort of cup shape. So I will be gluing that like that, not gluing it like that. So you want it to look as if it's cupping around the rose and not sort of going out the other way, like so. So like all these things, the time comes when you need to commit, which is always a bit nerve-wracking. So hot glue at the side and just a dab of hot glue, and of course the usual health and safety warnings if you're using a hot glue gun, that they are hot and please don't burn yourself. So I momentarily have to hold my finger onto the glue, and of course it's hot there, so it does you know, I can feel the heat. And then working your way round, so, and overlapping them. Again, I'm just feeling to make sure I know which is the bottom. That's the bottom, and I've got that nice cupped shape. I'm not quite sure you can pick that up on the camera, but I'm working round there and I'm just overlapping them as I go. So it's the trying to get the minimum amount of glue to hold the petal. So I've put this one on and that one on, and I will put photographs in the group afterwards so you can see them, without it being, you know, really glue heavy. It needs to be done with a degree of finesse. So I'm just doing the tiniest dot of glue. I'm not sure you can see that. It's just like a little drop of rain on the bottom, and then adding it in. I'm conscious I'm working pale on pale, but I'm sure you can see what I'm doing. Oh, colour matching, yes. So that's a great question. So I would think if you were going to choose, perhaps I'll throw the question back at you, you know, let's, what colour rose would you be choosing to have as your wedding flower? So I would, without wanting to answer for you, that I'm guessing it's going to be something quite, you know, a pale in colour. You know, would it be a white rose? Would it be a pink rose? And you would normally, I would suggest, that if you were buying the roses in or growing them in, that they're all going to be the same colour. So if, for instance, you were going for, you know, I've got here a pinkish rose. Yes, I've got some colour variation, but I'm just picking the petals up randomly so that I know that overall it's all going to match, because the flowers were all the same time. Yes, I think I've got round to what your question was now. So I'm not bothering, and I think the thing here is it's the art of being natural and random. So if I was to pick out some of these petals here, I've got a deep, just a bit of that raspberry ripple colouring on them. I don't know whether you can see that there. So I could, in theory, put all those coloured ones to one side to put in every fourth time I was going to glue a petal on. But sometimes it can just look a bit too fake. So what I'm doing is I'm just picking them up and going with the flow. But if you were, you know, you wanted more control, there's nothing to stop you, you know, sorting your petals out into different colour variations. But I think that you may spend a long time doing that and then not actually notice that you've done it, or decide that perhaps you've ended up with a stripe across the rose that doesn't look very natural. So I've gone round here once, so you can see the original rose in the middle, and then you can see all the petals going round like that on the edge. So I'm coming in with round 2, and the question then would be, how many times do you go round? And part of that is down to how many rose petals you've got, how many roses you have to hand. So I've only got these 4 roses in front of me, so my rose can't be any bigger than a composite of the 4 roses in front of me. And like a lot of these things, it's trial and error. So perhaps when I finish this, I'll measure how big the original rose was, and then I can measure how big my final rose was, and that might help you to work out how many roses you might need. But of course, every rose is different and unique, and you may not have the same number of petal count in each rose. So it can get quite technical, but I think, you know, probably if I was doing this, you know, and we talked before about, you know, how many flowers do you need for your wedding, and you know, building in the contingency. And of course, if you were using the rose for the bride, the composite rose, the Carmen Rose, it's quite likely that you would have roses in other parts of your flower, you know, the wedding flowers, to give some continuity. So in the event that you decided that your rose wasn't big enough and you wanted to add in more petals, that you would perhaps be able to, you know, pinch some roses that perhaps you had, that one's fallen off. Perhaps you wanted, you were going to have, you know, pedestal arrangements and the table arrangements. But I would always advise a little bit of a contingency, because you just don't know, you know, whether you're going to break things or, you know, come a cropper somewhere along the line. And really, it is no more difficult than this. But I will do a few more rounds. I seem to be having trouble with that last petal there. I've just been gluing each one at the bottom, but this one's not playing ball. So I might just put an extra bit of glue at the top, just the tiniest dot, just to hold it. So it's not a matter of, you know, can I glue all these petals on with just one dab of glue? It's, is it going to hold up together? And of course, it has to withstand at the end the waggle test. Is it going to withstand being, you know, not vigorously shaken, but imagine it's going to be held and picked up and put down, and who knows what might happen if a little flower girl gets hold of it. It has to be reasonably robust. So I'm finding that the bigger the head becomes, the more I'm having to add in a second dab of glue part way up. So if I show you the bottom, you can see there where I'm starting to come out. So it doesn't look the prettiest. So that is why I would need to cover that up with a little decorative finish, effectively creating a bit of a collar on the back. Is it much harder with real flowers? I would say the problem with, not necessarily, but I think you wouldn't make it so fast. So I'm making this as fast as I can withstand holding the glue. And the issue with the real flowers is that the glue doesn't stick instantly. And I think that was going to be the problem. So, you know, I spoke at the beginning that if you were going to use the real flowers, you'd have to line up your flowers, put the dab of glue on each one, let it sort of air dry for a bit, and then hold, but it doesn't stick. It sticks quite quickly, but it doesn't stick instantly like hot glue does. And really, I would advise against using hot glue with fresh flowers, because it's going to burn them. But like all these things, it's trial and error. And perhaps if you've got you know, a darker rose and you knew you were going to do a little finish on the back, perhaps you would be prepared to take that risk. But I would always advise that you practice a little bit. You may not make the full Carmen Rose, but you would need to practice a little bit just to see whether or not you're happy with the impact of the glue. So I'm adding these on, and I can feel myself, I've started to drift down towards the base of the rose. So this one I've lifted up a little bit. So you do have to keep remembering that you should be looking at the top of the rose to make sure it is flat-ish. It doesn't have to be totally flat, but you don't really want the petals sort of traveling back down towards the stem. And you can see there with the shape, this one actually looks quite natural the way it's falling off, you know, sliding to the side, but I think I do want to have a little bit of glue on that just so it does hold in place. So I'll do a few more rounds, and then I will show you from the side what it looks like. Because I haven't cut off my stem, I'm not quite sure how long I want it to be. It's getting a bit awkward now, having the stem and twisting the flowers around at the same time. So I have used, I think that's probably one rose plus one rose, so that's 2 full rose heads. You can see here that we're talking about, you know, when there's natural discoloration. So I've ended up with a little bit of deeper colouring there, and little flecks over the side. But again, I think that just looks like a natural rose, and I wouldn't overthink it. I think when you're doing these things, there's other things to think about than matching the shade of your particular colour variation. And if you're using, you know, a white rose throughout, a pink rose throughout, I would just work with whatever the natural colour variation was, just to give you, you know, a very natural look. And you will find it easy as well when you're using fresh flowers to decide which way is up on your petals, because they will, you do get that sort of yellowish whitish edge when you are pulling them off the flower stem. With my silk flowers, the only way I can tell which way is up is by feeling for the glue from last time round, because they are curved at both ends. Oops. Getting that on like that. Oops, that's fallen off. Getting all fingers and thumbs now. There, glue. I think I need a little dab there. Like that. So yes, that was 2 rose petals, 2 roses, and I've just got a few more, but you can see what the size was before and the after. And again, it will depend how big do you go. Well, the larger you go, the slightly more unstable everything will become. But once you put the backing on, that will hold everything together. And then it's down to the style of your bride as well. You know, if you've got a really neat, petite bride, she probably might not want anything bigger than this. But if your bride's wearing a huge dress, you don't necessarily want the flowers to get lost. Or if she's, you know, a larger size naturally, she might want something a little bit more dramatic. So what I'm going to do is take the camera back to me, and then I'll lift the flower up and show you what it looks like. See what we've got. So the larger ones look less natural. I think you're absolutely right. Now, can you see that there's a slight bit of movement on there? You know, we talk about, you know, when you choose to wire a flower, picking the wire that's the right weight for the flower without holding it upright. So I've actually, by adding extra flower petals on, I'm making the rose slightly unstable because it's heavier than it naturally would be. But of course, when you're holding this, you know, you won't get a bride holding it like this. She'll be holding it in the conventional way of just, you know, shorter stem and holding it upright, and you won't get that wobble so much. If I hold it up there, you can see that it looks really, really pretty. And I think you're right, it wouldn't too large, and it's going to be too garish, too big. I think you lose the subtlety of the sophistication if you went too large. So I'm imagining this as, you know, a slimline dress, you know, bride with a neat knot in her hair, and it's just really, everything is just neat and petite, if that can be a theme for a wedding. So I'm not quite sure whether it would be the kind of thing I would hold. I think I'd need something a little bit bigger. Or, you know, in the hair, and, you know, make it into a headdress as well. But you can see, I don't know whether how well the camera picks that up, but it is, I've tried to be as neat as I can at the back, but I can see that I've glued things, and we'll talk about that next time I come on and do a live video. So there's 2 options of neatening at the back. I could either go back in and lay my petals and make sure they came back to the center of the rose stem. So having said that I wanted the petals to lie flush with the top, I could finish off by having some that were returning underneath, or I could do a little bit of ribbon edging. And the way I would do that actually is to get a circle of cardboard, a bit of cereal packet, make a hole, slide it up the stem, and then I could glue that to the bottom of the flower. So if you did want to go a bit bigger, you would have something to rest on. And then I would cover it up with lots of pieces of one long piece of ribbon, but probably pleated, sort of concertinaed round. And again, it makes it time consuming. So all these things, it's quite lovely to make. But it's the neatening things off at the end, which is the not the tricky thing, but it just adds more time. And if you are doing DIY wedding, as we're discovering, you do want time to spend with your friends, families and loved ones. You don't want to be stuck in the kitchen madly gluing and sticking till midnight. So that is a lovely thing to make, and I think probably when I finish filming I might just add in the rest of my petals, just to, it's quite fun, it's quite therapeutic when you're not under pressure to produce it for a bride. Yes, that's a good idea. So question coming in, could you add the greenery to cover it? You could. That is a really great idea. Now the beauty of this greenery is I can just pull it off. Oh, I thought I could just pull it off. Let's be brave and pull it off. So yes, I could, with my little rose petals, I could snip them all off into individuals. Now, if I was doing this with roses, I wouldn't actually use the rose leaf. So I keep pointing to petal, because they're not very robust, and they will droop and dry out very quickly. But you can use salal, which I think I've talked about before, which is S-A-L-A-L. And it's very similar to the shape of a rose leaf, and it does actually dry. You quite often find it in dried flower bouquets, and that would be a good alternative. But imagine that is either a silk leaf to go with my silk flower, or it's my fresh salal to go with my fresh rose. I would then put the glue on the back and then have it going round the edge like that, and that would be a nice way to finish it as well. So actually there's 3 ways that we could finish: with rose petals, with the rose leaves, or with the ribbon detailing. So we'll talk about those later on. So for the purposes of the video, yes, they do. They almost look like sepals, yes. For the purposes of the video, I'm going to do a sort of formal sign off, because to naturally finish the end of the video, and then we can have a quick chat before you go. But I won't. I'll stop the recording so that it needs less editing for me when I upload the video for later. So that's all for me for now. And next time we meet, we will be finishing off the back. And of course, if you want to do any more research about Carmen Roses, which would cover any kind of composite flower, you're more than welcome to drop your ideas and thoughts and pictures you find into the Facebook group. And I will see you next time.